Hi once again, this is Professor Henderson. In this lecture, we're going to be discussing the roots of psychology. I also like to refer to this lecture as the lecture on old white dudes. First, before we get started, we're going to define psychology. Our textbook defines psychology as a scientific study of behavior and mental processes. Our key components of this definition is that psychology is a science. It's a rigorous discipline used with checks and balances, a rigorous published process. We do follow the scientific method. We also look at behavior. This could be everything from a simple response on a survey to include viewing you without your knowledge and getting your natural responses to different circumstances. We also look at mental processes, and these are anything that happens between those ears. And this will be the first section that we discuss as we get into our Unit 1. The first theory we're going to talk about is the evolutionary theory. And who do we think of? Well, we sure think of Charles Darwin. He postulated that there is a system, and the system is natural selection, where the individuals that can survive do survive, and those are the people that have the greatest degree of adaptive value. He uses this evolutionary theory to explain people's behavior and their mental processes in how those changes in their behavior and mental processes best serve their survival. He also postulated that we favor traits that promote reproduction and survival. So for those people who have traits that are not effective, those traits will actually be weeded out of the genetic process. He also focused on environmental changes that alter evolution's course. He focused primarily on animals, and specifically one species that he looked at were hummingbirds, and how hummingbird beaks changed depending upon the flowers available to them in their environment. We also have William Wundt. Wilhelm Wundt was one of our first researchers. He ran a scientific lab in Europe, and he really worked to identify the structures of the mind. That's why his theory is referred to as structuralism. He focused on research that described dimensions of feeling, specifically looking at the methodology of introspection, where he would ask his participants, what do you think about this experience? For example, he would place like an apple in front of the subjects in his studies, and he would say, what is it that you're experiencing here? Most people would describe them, but some people would start to internalize and say, oh, I am feeling hungry, I am feeling satiated, I am feeling happy. Very interesting philosophy, and we still use a lot of introspection today. William James followed after Wilhelm Wundt, and William James was one individual that really started to look at how the mind worked. While William Wundt wanted to focus on the structure of the mind, William James wanted to focus on the function of the mind. He also focused on interactions with the environment. He would place people within different circumstances and see how they respond. Today, what he started is actually the early pieces of what we now use in experimentation. He really wanted to look at and answer the question why. Why were people changing? What purpose did their behavior serve? So kind of an offshoot of Charles Darwin, an evolution, no pun intended, if you will, of the psychology as a science, and really looking at why people were adapting. And he really focused on what he called the stream of consciousness, or how people came to conclusions through talking and how they evolved their own ideas. Of course, there's Freud. This is the father of clinical psychology. He really pushed the psychoanalytic perspective. He is the founder of therapy in general. He found that when he allowed his clients to just talk, to just share their feelings, talk about their day. This is what we call the cathartic process. He found that when he created a space for people to do that without too much judgment, they eventually started to feel better about the choices they made and the experiences that they were having. Catharsis can include everything, though. It can include journaling, blogging, talking to a friend. It's not something that's required by a professional. Another gift from Freud is unconscious processes. Now, while it's very difficult to study, we do believe that there are unconscious processes. Much like in space where there's dark matter, where there is absence of something, there's the presence of something. Here, when we look at unconscious processes, when individuals are seemingly making decisions without any thought whatsoever, there are some unconscious processes happening in the background. Next, we come to conditioning, or John Watson. Now, John Watson is the individual that really started conditioning or learning research. He is most famous for the study of little Albert. Now, this was an orphaned child who he used in an experiment where he basically conditioned the child to be deathly afraid of a white rat or rabbit. I can't remember now which animal. They've done numerous studies since then. Watson Watson is most famous for his study of little Albert. Now, little Albert was a young orphan child that Watson took into his experimental lab and basically conditioned the child to be very afraid of a white rabbit. And he created that fear by pairing the white rabbit with the sound of a steel beam being banged. And that pairing created quite a bit of anxiety. There's a video posted in our fun stuff folder that will show you actually some of the experiments that were used. Next, we have B.F. Skinner. Now, B.F. Skinner, he really rejected internal processes. He wasn't too concerned about the structure or the function of the mind. He really wanted to focus on what was observable, what he could see, what he could study in your behavior and the consequences of behavior. So he really focused on systems of rewards and responses. The last one we're going to talk about really quickly is Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow is the father of humanism. He really emphasized the positive qualities of people. He also believed that people had the possibility for growth, and his theory has been used in personality studies and clinical studies. We are now seeing actually a rebirth or a regeneration of humanism in the spiritual sense, where people are really looking to the possibility of the human being as a spiritual process and a spiritual entity. Another key to the humanistic theory is that he believed that freedom to choose one's own destiny was central to humans, and that everything was possible. People were not limited. They were only constrained by what they were able to dream to do. Well, I realize this was a very brief introduction to our old white dudes, as I like to refer to them. Believe it or not, there are many, many contributions throughout our science from many different genders and races. But in the early days, the people that got published and the people that were in school were older white gentlemen. And we can actually talk a little bit more about this as we move forward. Until next time.